Let's get started. I don't know who else is joining us this late night, and let me know if the connection's not so good because we're less than ideal sometimes.
Yeah, no, things look fine at the moment.
Okay,
What time is tomorrow?
early, 7:45 a.m. I put on the
Oh,
WhatsApp.
okay, great.
What time? Shul's 8:30, right?
Yeah, my phone is not working right now.
Got it. Yeah, no, Shul's 8:30, I think. So I did. Hopefully we'll finish. We'll definitely finish by then.
Okay,
Okay,
good.
let's get started. I forgot where he got up to on Friday. Maybe you know.
I'm still pulling up uh, I'm I'm still pulling it up.
Perfect.
Uh,
Top line.
I
Okay,
think it was in the top line.
yeah, Shavua Tov, Robert, Chodesh Tov. So we are up to the top line. And again, just tell me if the sound is not so great on my end. I got a lot going on around me. Top line of Daf Yud Aleph, Amid Aleph, and first parak of Masechet Bava Batra. Tanya, says the Bright. Amru alav al Binyamin Tzaddik. They said about Binyamin Tzaddik, Shaya Memunah Kupashat Tzedakah. We don't know who this guy is. It's a very interesting name to have, Binyamin Tzaddik, right? But his job was one of his jobs or one of his volunteer things is that he was mimunal kubashal tzedakah. He was in charge of the accounts for the charity. Pamakat. Now, one time, I started a minute early. Pamachat bata isha lefanav b'shnei batzoret. We just got started. Ken, I'll go back. Well, let me start from the beginning again. Why not? Let's do the whole sugya. It's a great story. Tanya, we're at top line of Yud Aleph Amid Aleph. Amru alav Binyamin Tzaddik. They told a story about a man named Binyamin the righteous. Shahaya Mimunal Kupashal Tzedakah. He was appointed to be in charge of the charity collection. Pamachat, third line now. One time, Bata Isha lefanav b'shnei batzoret. A woman came to him in a year of famine. Amra lo, and she said to him, Rebbe, parneseni. Rebbe, I need food. I need money. Amra la, he said to her, look, the what's it called? The thing is dry, right? The leaving is dry. Avodah she'ein b'kupash tzedakah klum. The till is empty. There's nothing left to give you. We're unfortunately it's a year of famine. Everyone had used up all the money. Amralo, so she said to him, fifth line from the top, Rebbe, im einata mefarneseni. If you don't give me food, I'm starving. Hari isha b'shiva b'nei meitim. I and my 7 children are going to die. We've got nothing to eat. Amad, so Rebbe, this person, not Rebbe, Binyamin Tzaddik, got up, upirnasami shelo, and he provided her from his own money, so not from his professional duties of being a charity, operator. He gave his own money because he felt bad for her. Liyamim, now years later, or days later, Yamim usually means years, but sometimes means days, but sometime later, Chala, this guy Binyamin got sick, and he was on his deathbed. He had some, devastating illness. He was dying. Amru Malachei Hasharet Lefnei Kadosh Baruch Hu. The story goes that the Malachei Hasharet, the angels, said in front of God, Ribono Shel Olam, Ata Marta, you said God, Kol Mikayim Nefesh Achat MiYisrael, anyone who sustains one life of Yisrael, Kilu Kiyim Olam Malay. It's like they supported a whole world. We're going to have this Gemara in Sanhedrin, where this actually comes from, right? And Binyamin HaTzadik, Binyamin the righteous, Chayta Isha V'Shiva Banah. He brought life by sustaining a woman and her 7 sons. Yamut b'shanim muatot. Can he die before his time? He's a young man, right? Doesn't seem fair to this promise. B'shanim hamuatot halalu, in these few years. Miyad, immediately God was karulo gzar dino. God ripped up the din and he became healthy again, or he recovered. Tana and the Braita taught Osifalo Esrim Ushtayim Shanal Shnotav, that he lived another 22 years after this terminal diagnosis because of the schut of giving tzedakah. Of course, there's a lot of very nice ramazim in the story. But if you recall, Yosef,
There's Chana and her 7 sons.
Chana and 7. Well, Yosef, remember, was away from his father for 22 years because Yaakov was away from his father for 22 years. Anyways, clearly there's a very interesting mashal. The point is, and this, of course, is a continuation from the Daf Yomi from the last few days, we've been extolling the virtue of giving charity. One more story we'll have, and then we're going to get back to our Bava Batra topic. Tanur Abanan, the second to last narrow line, they told in a Braita, Maseh b'Munbaz HaMelech. There was a story with Munbaz the king. Rashi says Munbaz was a son of Hilni Hamalka, who was a Maccabean princess. So whatever, it's Mumbaz, I don't know if he's known in history, but he was Bizbaz Otzrotav Votzrot Avotav B'Shnei Batzoret. There was a year that was a famine, and he opened up all the treasure chests of the king and his father's treasure chests, all the trust funds. He emptied out all the accounts to give people money and food for sustaining them. And all of his relatives came and said, well, you're giving away the family jewels, right? His brothers, I guess he was the king, but his brothers and his father's family said, you're giving away. Amrula, they said to him, the first wide line, Avotecha ganzu v'hosifa al shel avotam. Our fathers, they gathered money, they hid money, they invested so that we had a better life than their family, right? And you are going the opposite way. You are reducing our economic status by giving away all the inheritance. Amar lehem, he said to them, you know, I'm the one who's right. Avotai, my forefathers and your forefathers, ganzu lamata, they hid things for this world below, for olam hazeh. But ani ganazti lamala, I am hiding things and storing up for the world to come. Shenemar, the pasuk says, eretz emet me eretz titzmach, truth comes from the world, but tzedek mishamayim nishkof. That tzedek, righteousness and tzedakah, comes from heaven. So I'm investing in something that has a much greater future than what my forefathers invested in. Avotai ganzu b'makom shayat shaletet bo. My forefathers, gave money in the bank. They put it in Chase, but all the banks can close down. But I am storing my money near God where no one's going to touch it. It says tzedek u'mishpat mechon kisecha, right? That tzedek is the seat of God, so it's right next to God's chair, whatever that means. Avotai ganzu davar she'eno seperot. They put aside money. Money is dead. It's just money. Ani ganasti davar she'seperot. What I'm doing is investing in people and in tzedakah that produces fruit. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Amrut Sadik Kitov, they say about a righteous man that he's good. Ki pri ma'alehem yochelu, that they will eat the fruit of his work. Avotai ganzu otzrot mamon. They put aside money. Ani gonasti otzrot nefashot. I'm collecting my contribution to people. Shenemar pri tzadik eitz chayim v'lokeach nefashot. The one this is from Mishlei. Lokeach nefashot chacham. That a person who invests or supports people is even wiser, right, in terms of their investment. It's from Mishnah, and just make sure it's true.
There's a lot of ways to say this.
It's all beautiful explanations, but this pasuk is from, where's this pasuk from? Daled is in Mishnah, Mishnah Yudalev. Avotai ganzula acherim. In fact, Miriam, thanks for joining us. Avotai ganzula acherim. My forefathers, they hid money for others to benefit, meaning they're going to die, and their children and grandchildren are going to get it. Ani ganasti la'atzmi, I am investing in myself. Shenemar ulecha tiyet tzedakah. When you do righteousness, it goes to you. Avotai ganzu l'olam hazeh, ani ganasti l'olam haba. Shenemar v'halach lefanecha tzidkecha, kavod Hashem yasvecha. That, when you got the kavod of God will be with you when you go in front of God with righteousness. So that is the closing of our whole sugya of tzedakah and how important and righteous and wonderful it is to give charity. Now back to Bava Batra, right? So we're at the two dots. Miriam's the first two dots around 10 lines down the wide lines. The Mishnah, if you recall, said, right, that are you part of the city, right? We tried to define in the previous Mishnah a couple of days ago about who has to give taxes, who's part of a city. And one explanation, I don't remember where the Mishnah was, there we go, on Daf Zion. One explanation in the Mishnah was who's part of a city that has to invest in the door and the gates and the upkeep. So the Mishnah said, Kami be'er b'hei kanshe ha'ir, 12 months. But if you buy a house, you get immediate citizenship, right? Well, in this case, it's a negative because you got to pay, but you got to pay taxes. So says the Gemara now, beit dira hareu kanshe ha'ir. If you buy a house, you're like a member of the city. Matnit and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. The Mishnah is not like Rashbag. The Tanya Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Imkana bakarka kol shehu harehu kanshe ha'ir. You don't need to buy a house, you just need to buy land. You buy land in the city and you plan to build a house, you're already considered to be a resident, and you got to pay taxes. You can vote in the election, maybe, not that the Mishnah talked about that, but you got to pay taxes. The Tanya Asmar, is that really true? But there's another Braita, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said something completely different. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Imkana sham karka haruya lebeit dira harehu kanshe ha'ir. You can't just buy land. You got to buy land that's livable, that's buildable land, right? It has to be zoned appropriately and irrigated. So that's a different shear. And just Gemara, Trei Tanai, Aliba de Reb Shimon Gamliel. You often will have that. There's two Tanaim with different standards in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and of course we don't know which one is right, but both are quoted as opinions. Okay, says the Mishnah now, middle of the page of Daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. Ein cholkin et hachatzer shehei arba amot lazeh v'arba amot lazeh. The case here is you come to split up a chatzer, right? So the simple case is, someone died, and they left the chatzer to two of their children, and the children want to split it up because they don't like each other. They don't want to share it together, right? But says the Mishnah, you can only force people to split up a chatzer if after you split it up, there's going to be 4 amot for each. Say 8 amot in the chatzer. Because if you have a chatzer without 4 amot, it's not a chatzer. And a chatzer is meant to be an entryway to your house. Remember, they had a street called a street, which is Reshut HaRabim. Then a mavoy, which we often say an alleyway. Then a chatzer, which is a courtyard. And then several houses, openings into the chatzer. But if the chatzer doesn't give you 4 amot in front of your house, then it's useless. What are you going to do with the chatzer? You can't hang out there. You can't play ball there. I don't know, you can't talk there. So you have to have a minimum of 4 amot in order to force people to split it up. If it's less than that, they should share it. Okay. A field has to have 9 kav. Now, kav, remember, is a dry measure. I don't remember what it is exactly. I looked it up before. But it's a dry measure of seed in this case, meaning 9 kav of seed, which might be 5 acres. I don't know exactly how much plant, whatever it is. So I think we learned in Erechen that a kav, I forget if it was a kav or 9 kav does a beit sa'ah, right? One of them plants a beit sa'ah. I forgot if it's a kav or the whole 9 kav. Either way, it's a large amount.
A kav is 1/6 of a seah.
Right, but thank you, Miriam, again from Jerusalem. But my point is that this is not the shear of a kav, right? A kav is like a postage stamp. The point is that, right, it's a dry measure. It's that you take enough seed that's a kav and you plant it so that it grows, right? Which might be, 2 acres or something. But whatever it is, we'll see in the Gemara actually tomorrow a little bit about the size. But that's how much space you need, a kav or 9 kav, for one, and 9 kav for another. Rabbi Yehuda says you don't need full 9 kav, half of 9 kav. Ad sheba tisha chatzei kavin lezeh, meaning 4.5, right? Half of 9 kav, or tisha chatzei kavin lezeh, or 9 half kav for the other. Now, if you have a garden, remember, a garden is where you plant your vegetables and your things like that. You don't need as much space. It's not a wheat field or whatever they grow in their fields. Ad sheba chatzi kav lezeh. You only need half a kav of seeds in that space. So I don't know, again, that might be 10 feet by 10 feet, whatever shear it is to plant half a kav of seeds. Rabbi Kiva again says half of that. Beit Rova, not half a kav, but a quarter of a kav. Below at the trochlin. Now, other things, let's say you have a trochlin, which is we always usually translate as like an entryway kind of thing. I don't know if they have a better word there, but some kind of entryway. Below at the trochlin, where am I? Sorry. Below at Muran, not a Muran, which is like a room that you use to sort of, some say drawing room, like a room that you use as like an entryway. Below at Shovach, and not a Shovach is a chicken coop or any bird. Below at Talit, and Talit, of course, is like not a Talit that we wear for tefillah, but like a blanket, right? Let's say the father died and he left a big blanket, and the sons don't want to talk to each other, so they want to cut it in half, right, and share it. Below at Merchatz, or a bathhouse. Below at Beit Abad, or a press, olive press usually is a Beit Abad. Below at Beit HaShlachim. The Beit HaShlachim is a field that's irrigated. So an irrigated field, Rashi points out, and the Gemara is going to point out later, tomorrow, I think, that you need much less, you can grow things much more bountifully in that kind of field, because you can water it very aggressively, and so you can grow a lot more in a small space, right? Below, you need to have a shear for each one to have their own independent field, their own independent talit, their own independent bathhouse. So if it's a very small talit, and there isn't going to be enough to cover 2 people, then you can't force them to split it. Ze'aklal, says the Mishnah, this is the rule. Anything that if you split it up, it still is that thing. You cut this talit in half, it's still a talit. Then you can force them to split it. But if people are not going to call it a talit anymore, they're going to call it a bath towel or a rag or whatever, then that's not okay. The same is true about a field and about a house and a press, etc. Vimlav in chokim. Now, when is this whole mission talking about? When they don't agree right? But if people agree, they can do whatever they want to do. Even if it's less than this, if the two brothers, or it could also be the same thing by partners, but two brothers decide they want to split, they can split any way they want. But now, if the father died and left them a scroll of one of the 24 books of Tanakh, say Sefer Hosea, then they're not allowed to split it. Let's say they say, I'll take part A, you take part B, right? So they can't do that because it's not kavod. You're not allowed to split it up. Rashi says, doesn't mean you have to cut it in half. They used to write their Sfarim the way we write a Sefer Torah, right, with different portions. So even so, it's not kavod for Tanakh, for a book of Tanakh, to cut it up into portions. Now, says the Gemara, Amar Basi, Amar
Aren't there
Yochanan.
situations where there might be shot dachak? For instance, during the Holocaust, people in concentration camp, one had one daf of Bava Kama, someone had a few dafim of Chumash, and they would, that's all they had. So they would share that, or they would use these pieces of.
So a couple of points. I would say, first of all, obviously, shots at Chak, like the concentration camps, none of these rules are relevant for. But just to be clear, this doesn't necessarily apply to a Gemara, for example, or a Siddur, right, or printed text, which obviously they didn't have in the times of the Gemara. But it only refers to Sifrei Kodesh. Remember we had Masechet Shabbat, and elsewhere, Sifrei Kodesh refers just to the books of the Tanakh. And remember, books that are like Medrash and things like that are not considered to be Sifrei Kodesh. Again, please tell me if you can't hear me, because we have a lot of background noise here.
You're fine.
Okay, Amar Basi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Says the Gemara now. 10 lines, 15 lines on the bottom. Says Rabbi Basi, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Arba amot shamru chutz mishal ptachim. When we say that you get 4 amot in the chatzer, that doesn't mean that if you have a chatzer, it's 8 amot, 2 people can split it up. Because every door that opens to the chatzer needs to have 4 amot in front of the door for the private use of the person who lives in that house. That's the whole point of a chatzer, right? Is that you would come up to the chatzer with your donkey or your whatever, full of produce or full of wares, and you can't drive the donkey into the house to unload in the house because you got stuff in your house. So you have to use the space in the entranceway in your chatzer to unload and load up your stuff. So you need to have dedicated 4 amot for your doorway. That's not shared. So when we say you get 4 amot in the chatzer, it's besides the 4 amot in front of your doorway. And if there wasn't enough to have 4 amot in front of your doorway and another 4 amot, then you wouldn't be allowed to split it up. Okay, that's what Rabbi Yochanan was quoted as saying, Barbas. Says the Gemara, Tainami Hachi. In fact, there's a brayta that says exactly that. Ein chokin et chatzer. You don't split up the chatzer. Ad shehei ba 8 amot lezeh, u8 amot lezeh. 8 amot for one and 8 amot for the other. Says Gemara, what do you mean 8 amot? Our Mishnah said 4 amot. Va'nantnan 4 amot lezeh, 4 amot lezeh. El shmamina, obviously, 8 amot means 4 amot for your doorway and 4 amot outside your doorway, right? El shmamina kidrab asi shmamina. That you need to have a minimum of 4 amot for your door, and the Mishnah is saying 4 for one door, 4 for another door, and a minimum of 4 more for each person in order for it to be split up. So that's why we say 8 amot and 8 amot. Now, some people, instead of saying this was a support, they asked a question from the Braita on the Mishnah, right? From the Mishnah on the Braita, I guess. It's not our Mishnah says, Mishnah says you need to have 4 amot. Hatanya, but the Braita says 8 amot lezeh. And Rabbi Yossi said, said the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Arba amot shamru chutz mishal ptachim. Our Mishnah said 4, but it means 4 besides the 4 amot for the door. So if you have 2 people and 2 doorways, you need 4 amot for each of those. And our Mishnah then said 4 more amot in order to split it up. Amar Rav Huna. Asked Rav Huna, I have a very interesting question, says Rav Huna. Let's say a person dies, okay, or the partner split up. Let's just say a person dies. And they leave their chatzer to 2 different, they leave their house, to 2 different children. One gets a house that has 2 doorways in the chatzer, and one gets a house that has 1 doorway. Okay, we're not asking right now how big the square footage is of the house. But the father did not designate how to split up the chatzer. So do you split up a chatzer according to the number of people living there? Here there's 2 people, or based on the number of doors that they have out to the chatzer. So says Rav Huna, chatzer mitchaleket in an inheritance or in a splitting of partners, lefi pitacheha. Sorry, that's a statement. Says Rav Huna, not a question. Chatzer is divided according to the doorways. So if a father left one child 2 doorways and another child, unit number B, which has 1 doorway, but didn't designate how he wants the chatzer to be split, you assume that the one with 2 doorways gets 2/3 of the chatzer, and the one with 1 doorway gets 1/3 of the chatzer. Say it's a 30 amma chatzer, one gets 20 and one gets 10. Rav Chisda says, no, it's not how it works. You get 4 amot for every door. So if you've got 2 doors, you get 4 amot for each door. Okay? Notnim arba amot d'chol petach upetach. You get 4 amot for each door. So if one brother gets 2 doors, he gets 8 amot. Another brother gets 1 door, he has 4 amot. There are 18 amot left behind. Split the 18 amot halfway, 9 and 9. V'hashar cholkim b'shaveh. The rest you split equally. So you get space for your door, but you don't get extra space in the chatzer according to Rav Chisda, right? That's the machloket. Tanya kavatei Rav Chisda. And there's a braita that supports Rav Chisda, because the braita says the following: Pitachim b'chatzer. You've got doorways in a chatzer. Yesh lam arba amot. You get 4 amot for every doorway. Let's say one brother has 1 petach, and one brother has 2 petachim. Notel arba amot. He gets 4 amot, assuming for his doorway. The other one gets 8 amot. The hashar chokim b'shaveh. Sounds a lot like Rav Chisda, right? Now says the braita, what if you have a doorway that's not the standard opening of 4 amot, right? I was waiting for someone to ask me, but I'm going to just say it because no one asked me. The assumption here is that you get 4 amot width and 4 amot length, right? You get 4 by 4 in front of your doorway. Maybe everyone assumed that, right? Because 4 amot is one measure. The assumption is you get 4 by 4. It's a square amot, okay? Says the braita, if one person has a petach rachav shmona amot, you have a very wide, double wide door, right? It's a garage entry. So you have a petach that's 8 amot, then notel shmona amot keneged petach. You get 8 amot for that doorway, the arba amot b'chatzer, and 4 amot in the chatzer. Says the Gemara, what do you mean 4? What does the 4 amot have to do with anything? Arba amot b'chatzer ma'ay v'datayu. Amar Abaya haki kamer, what I just explained, that you get notel shmona amot be'orech hachatzer. You get 8 amot wide, keneged your garage opening. The arba amot b'rochav hachatzer. You get 4 amot in front, outwards from it. And again, this is all based on the premise that the purpose of a chatzer is to be an unloading and loading place in front of your house. That's the whole reason you have a chatzer. Same reason people have driveways, right? So instead of parking on the street and dragging something in, you go into your driveway and you drag it in from your driveway. So the chatzer is essentially a communal driveway. And therefore, if you have a door, you have to have space in the chatzer in front of your door to load and unload. That's the assumption. Amir, where am I? The 2 lines in the bottom. Amir Meimar. Meimar says something very interesting, which is a little bit unclear why he's saying it and what it has to do with anything. But hi, peri de sufli. I don't know what the word sufli means there. The way Rashi explains it is that they used to take their fruits after they ate them, like their pits from their dates, after you chewed on them, and they would compost them. And the way they would compost them is they would make a pit in the chatzer, and you would throw all your dates into the pits. And the animals would come and they would stand around the pit and chew up these date seeds, basically. And I don't know if they swallowed them and pooped them out or they chewed them and spit them out. But either way, it was like a feeding trough almost for your animals. The Rabbeinu Gershom says that, in fact, that's exactly what it is. It's a feeding trough for animals. Rashi says what I just told you. That was a place where they would put the pits from their dates. If you recall, in Bava, they ate a lot of dates, right? Maybe in Israel too. It was a very big staple of their diet. So
Steinsaltz suggests that this was what was left after the dates were used to make beer.
Oh, so you crush them. Oh, I see. Okay, Rashi says gar ineg tamarim. I understood it that way, but yeah, so it means the extra, right? The seeds from the dates. Very interesting. Okay, so they had all this stuff, which of course humans are not going to eat, but animals might get some nourishment from. So the problem then is that you need to have access to the animals to get to this pit in your chatzer. So says Ameimar, you get yesh arba amot l'chol ruach v'ruach. You get 4 amot every direction, right? Again, the Rabbeinu Gershom here, I think, explains sort of that it's a situation where the father died and said, my date pit pile goes to son A, but didn't say if son A should get the chatzer around it. So you assume that he gets the chatzer in 4 amot all around it. That's only if he didn't designate an entryway, meaning there wasn't a designated way for the animals to approach it. If there's a opening, so to speak, then you only get 4 amot in that direction, in the direction of the opening towards this animal feed thing.
Well, Rashi says yeshto arba amot b'chatzer l'chol svivoteha, in all directions.
From the pit.
That's right.
That's it, right? So that's what Amemar said, not Rashi. And then Amemar added and said, but if you have a designated way to get there, then you only get 4 amot from that designated way. Rashi seems to explain again. Rashi explains that your door of your house is right next to this thing. So there's like a designated, like it's in front of your door. But Rabbeinu Gershom actually sort of explains a little differently that the father left it with a designated pathway in front of it. Second line now.
But it's all directions. They all agree that it's all directions, right?
Well, not the second. So again, that was what Amemar said. But he said if there's a designated direction, then you only get in that direction. If you're miyached la pitcha, if you designated a doorway that is a way to connect to this pit, then you only get 4 amot in that direction. Eino ela arba amot lifnei pitcha.
Right. Okay.
Second line, Amar Avuna. Aksadra. Now let's say in front of you. So again, you have a courtyard, and my space. Let's say I own space off the courtyard, but in front of my house, instead of having a front door, I have an aksadra. Aksadra means like a pergola, right? Like a covered whatever, like a front porch. So then you don't get
Portico is how corn
a
trans.
portico. Okay, you have a portico, but a portico. The key thing here is that there's a roof, but it's completely open on all sides. So then you don't need to get 4 amot in front because you could drive the donkey right into the portico and unload there. So, and if you have a aksadra ino arba amot, time amai, what's the reason we give you 4 amot? Mishum pirik maso, in order to unload your groceries, right? Hacha efshar da'ayil the gave u'mefarek. You can drive the animal straight into the house, basically, into the front courtyard of your house and unload in that place. Mativ Rav Sheshed, ask Rav Sheshed, what about the Breita? The Breita says, Echad sha'arei batim, ve'echad sha'arei aksadrot, both in front of gates of houses and gates of porticos, yesh lam arba amot. Very, very explicitly says, unlike what you just said. Kitanya, no, says Rav Funa, that's referring to aksadra de beirav. That's not referring to an open portico. That's an aksadra de beirav. The beirav, this is Rashi understands that it means. I don't remember if it's here or not. I don't think it's here. But elsewhere, Rashi says aksadra. Oh, it is here. Sorry, that they used to have windows around. Aksadra beirav meant the library, right, where you sat and studied. So I don't know. They had windows all around it, either because they needed air or because I don't know it was too dark. But there, it's basically an open aksadra. But it's not open. You just have windows. You still can't drive your donkey into the window, right? The aksadra
closed then, right? Isn't it closed?
Sorry, it's closed. Yeah, they're closed.
It's closed because the windows essentially are the walls of it, right? You're looking to, so it's really closed.
That's the Gemara's question. So aksadra de beirav pshita. Obviously, you need 4 amot. You can't drive into there. Adrinu ma'ayu. It's a normal room. El aksadra rumaita. It's referring to this thing called aksadra rumaita. I don't know. Rumaita sounds like a Roman word to me, but an aksadra, maybe a Roman aksadra, where they actually was open. There were partial walls. So you had a wall that was like 3 feet tall, and then it was open from the wall to the ceiling. So you might have thought that maybe you can't drive the animal in, but it's open. You could put things over the wall. Basically it's partially walled. Kamash Malan, that in that case, you don't expect someone to bring it inside and you get arba amot. But if it's completely open, like a regular aksadra, pergola, that's the word he used, right? Then you don't have to get 4 amot because you can bring your animal inside.
Isn't your pergola going out 4 amot anyways? You're using.
No, but it has to be your own. You can't put a pergola in the chatzer. You have to put a pergola in your own property, right? It's not.
But could you potentially put pergola that was closed onto the 4 amot?
No, we'll ask that question in a second. Tanur Rabbanan says the Braita. Beit Shar, Beit Shar usually means a gate, right? A gatehouse. Aksadra, which we now know means a pergola. Merpeset. Now, merpeset is a very interesting concept because it's not what we call merpeset. They used to have, like many places still do, where you had houses on top of each other, right? So you had a row of houses, say 5 houses, open to a chatzer, and you have 5 houses on top of that. So in front of the 5 houses on top, you would have like in a hotel, right? You'd have a hallway in front of them with an opening to each of the 5 houses. So that hallway is called a merpeset. Now, and it's shared. But says the Mishnah, the Braita, sorry, if you have a merpeset, you get 4 amot in front of the stairway leading up to the merpeset. You don't get 4 amot in front of each house, right? Because you don't bring your animals up the stairs. They didn't have elevators back then, right? So if you have a merpeset, yesh lahen arba amot, right? But says the Braita very clearly, hayachamisha batim, tuchim the merpeset. If the merpeset has 5 houses open to it, you don't get 20 amot in front of the stairway. Because what if they all come home at the same time, right? Ein lehen ela arba amot bilvad. You only get 4 amot in front of the stairway. Rashi says the ladder, but I guess it would be better if they had a stairway. But a stairway or a ladder that goes up to that merpeset. Bo mine Rav Yochanan Rav Yanai. Ask Rav Yochanan Rav Yanai, the question that's probably on everybody's mind is, what if you have a chicken coop? Lul shel tarnegolim. Yesh arba amot ein lehem arba amot. You need to have 4 amot in front of your chicken coop. So you mean, do you need to come in and you got to unload your chickens and load up the eggs? Maybe you need space. Amalei said to him, of course you don't need arba amot from a chicken coop. Time amai, the whole reason we gave arba amot mishum pirik masao is for loading things up. But here, chickens are very good at jumping up on their own. So you just ride up there with the chickens, let them hop out and climb up on their own. So you don't need arba amot. What about let's say you have a courtyard, and my house, I have a door. If you open my door, I have a house, a beautiful 40 by 20 foot house, but half of it has a roof and half of it doesn't have a roof, right? Again, it's all my house, it's all walled in, but half of it doesn't have a roof. So do you say that you still get arba amot in front of the house or not? Okay. Yesh lo arba amot ein lo arba amot. So Rashi explains that, remember, the whole reason why don't we just say to you, why do you need 4 amot in front of your house to unload your car? Drive your car into the house and unload there, right? And the reason is that you're not going to bring your donkey into your house because you got furniture in the house and you've got rugs in the house, and your donkey's not going to be a good thing in the house. But if your roof is open, you clearly have an outdoor space. No one has fancy couches without a roof, right? So why don't you bring the donkey into the outdoor space? Says the Gemara, the answer is, Amar Rav Nachman said, Ein lo arba amot. You don't get 4 amot because drive your donkey into your house. And lo mi boy kirav milagav. It's not only if the roofed part, kiruyo, means the part that has a roof, is the back part, meaning the front 20 feet are unroofed and the back 20 have a roof. Dev shadayal legavai, right? Because you're going to bring the donkey inside of mefarek and unload. Elafilu kiruyav klape chutz. Even if the outside part, meaning the part towards the chatzer, is the part that has a covering on it, you can drive the donkey straight through your living room to your backyard, which is uncovered, and unload in the backyard. So you don't get a right to 4 amot in the chatzer.
Rashi says she'ein derech letet kelem b'chatzer she'eino makura, that you don't unload it in a place that's not roofed.
No. Kelem means your sofa. You don't put your sofa in a house, right? You're not going to have fancy furniture and nice stuff in your house if there's no roof on top of it. So you can bring your donkey there, and your donkey can do whatever it needs to do, or whatever wagon, and you don't have to worry about it ruining the space. The point is, you don't bring a donkey into an inhabited house. But if you don't have a roof, that's not considered to be regularly inhabited, because as Rashi points out, you don't put kelim, no one's going to put their fancy leather couch without a roof. Now, Rafuna asked Reb Ami, Tosfos is very bothered by this statement, because elsewhere we have learned that Rabbi Ami was a subordinate of Rav Huna. So why would Rav Huna have been asking questions of Rav Ami? So Tosfos changes it to Rav Ami, which he thinks solves the problem. So Rav Huna me Rav Ami, echad mi bnei mavoy shebikesh lachzer pitchon mavoy acher. Let's say, remember, mavoy is where you have several houses in chatzerim on like an alleyway, on a street. This guy decides the traffic on 232nd Street is too much, right? My field connects to 231st Street. So I'm going to open up a doorway and start driving my traffic out to 31st Street. Says Rabbi Ami, says Rabbi Rafuna from Rabbi Ami, if you want to do that, can the people in the other mavoi say, no way, we have enough traffic. We don't need another person driving into our mavoi. Are they allowed to, or are they not allowed to? Amalei said, the people can stop you and they can say, look, we're going to discuss this more tomorrow in case you're wondering. But they can say, we have enough traffic. You already have a situation. You, without our permission, are not allowed to open up your house into our street. Now, the next thing seems to have nothing to do with that, which is why Tosfos argues with Rashi, but let me read Rashi anyways to you. Achsanai, let's say, remember they had a very common practice. I only know this because I know the Gemara, but I understand. My teachers told me it was a common practice that that armies would come through town and they would force the people in the town to feed and clothe and most importantly here, house their army.
Not
Right?
in America.
So they would show up and the Brits would say to the colonialists, speaking about July 4th, you have to provide food and place for our army, which is why we have an amendment against that, right?
And that was one of the specific complaints in the Declaration of Independence, quartering.
Correct. So that's why Rosa just brought that up. Correct. So,
Yep.
but it was a very common thing, of course, in the old times. So now let's say, this is how Rashi understands it. Let's say two brothers share a chatzer, but one of them has two doors in his house and one has one door in his house. And, the Persian army shows up with 10 guys and say, give us a place to stay. So do you get space in the chatzer according to the number of doors, or according to the number of people in the house, right? So that was the question. Achsanai, if you have to host people, this is forced hosting. Lefi b'nei adam mitchaleket, according to the number of people in the house, the population, or lefi p'tachim mitchalka, according to the doorways, right? Amalei said, lefi b'nei adam mitchaleket, it goes according to the people in the house, according to population, not according to the doorways. There's a Braita that supports this, because the Braita says, and according to Rashi's Braita, seems to make no sense, so I'll explain to you Tosfos in a second. If you have dung, right? So remember, the chatzer, of course, was where they kept all the animals. And so at the end, every 30 days, they would come out with a big bucket, probably more often than that, and they would collect great big piles of manure, right? And garbage and composting and all the great stuff that everybody wanted to put out in their fields. The question, of course, is, what if there's two houses in the chatzer, but one has two doors and one has one door? They split the dung equally. Does one get 2/3? Does one get 1/3? How do you figure that out? Very big questions, right? So mitchalek, says the Braita, lefi pitachim. It would be split according to the doorways in the chatzer, meaning if you have two doors, presumably you are producing more garbage or have more animals and you're running a bigger operation. But achsanai, and that's why Tosfos changes this from Rashi. Tosfos says the achsanai, the question here was, these Persians came and camped out in your field, in your chatzer, but when they left after 2 weeks, they left behind all their garbage, right? As would be expected. And so now the question is, who gets their garbage? Do you, yeah, you want their garbage. It's dung from animals. It's dog poop or cow poop or whatever. So who gets the stuff? And there, it doesn't go according to the doorways because it doesn't come from inside the chatzer. It comes from the people. And there it's mitchaleket according to the house people. Mitchaleket, where am I? Lefi b'nei adam. It's based on the people. So that's why Tosfos understands this as the dung from Nachsanai. Rashi, as I explained earlier, says it means who has to house and give space to the army in the chatzer. Amr of
So
Huna.
that's the people in the house, right? Like when Rashi said, Hadarim babayit.
The brightest, everyone agrees that's going to the people in the house. The question is, are they people in the house get the stuff that are left behind, or the people in the house have to give their space of the yard to be used by the army? Okay.
The army left though.
No, that's Tosfos' shot. Rashi's shot is that they're just showing up. They're saying, we're ready to stay in your yard, and you have to decide who's going to give them space in the yard. So according to Rashi, according to the number of houses or people live in the houses, you have to give them a space. If 5 people live in one house and 5 in the other, they split the space equally. Says the Gemara now. Rose's question. Amar.
Wait, I don't understand. Who's splitting the space between whom?
So Reuven and Shimon have a courtyard in front of their house. The army shows up with 10 guys and say, we need 10 spots to host our people. So who has to give space in the courtyard? So do you give it based on the number of doorways you have, the number of people you have in the house? If Reuven has 5 people in his house and Shimon has 5 people in his house, the halacha is that they each have to give 5 spaces in the yard to the army that's coming to stay with them.
Even if they open.
Even if Shimon has 2 doors and Reuven only has 1 door.
So they give 10 spaces in the yard. Is that it?
Yeah, there's 10 soldiers. You got to give whatever they ask for. No one's questioning the soldiers here. Everyone's doing what they ask for. Well, you get killed.
So if there's 2 doors, it doesn't matter how many doors they have. It's the number of people.
Right, that's correct.
And if there's only
according to-
one person in the house, they give 1 space. And even though there are 10 army people,
No, you'd be proportional, right? If one house has 9 people, one house has 1 person, then it would be 9 and 1. But if there's only 2 people, right, you still have to give 10 spaces to the army. You don't have a choice there.
they still have to, even if you have only 2 people, 1 in each house,
Still have
Correct.
to
The
give
army
10
doesn't give you a
spaces?
choice about how many spaces to give. They
What?
come in demand.
What's that?
The army does not give you a choice of how many spaces to give. They're demanding space in your yard. You don't have the option of saying no. They have guns.
Well, you do, but they'll just kill you.
Right.
No, I understand that,
fine.
but you say they're based on the number of people in the house. If there are only 2 people, 1 in each house, so are they only obligated to give 2 spaces then?
No, they have to each give 50%.
Oh. All right.
Amar Rav Huna. Says Rav Huna around 20 lines from the bottom. Echad mibnei mavoy shebikesh listom keneged pitcho. Let's say you decide, you have 4 amot in front of your doorway, but every day when you show up to unload your donkey, there's some kid playing ball there. So you come up with, or someone parked their car there. So you come up with a great idea. You're going to put up a house. You're going to make a closed driveway up to your house in the chatzer, in the shared chatzer, right? So you say, I get arba amot. I want to close off my arba amot. Says the Gemara, you can't do that, right? Where am I? B'nei mavoy makvin alav. The people in the mavoy can say no dice, right? Shemar be'alehem et derech, because now they can't walk in front of your house anymore. They got to walk around it. So you're making the derech longer for them. And if you're carrying, 500-pound beams or whatever, 100-pound beams, those arba amot make a very big difference. Mate, asking, what about the following Braita? The Braita says, chamesh chatzerot p'tuchot l'mavoy. Right? You have, remember, a mavoy is like a cul-de-sac. You've got 5 chatzerot, 5 courtyards that open onto this mavoy. Rashi explains, remember, mavoy is usually closed on 3 sides, right? So there's one door that's open, one entranceway that's open to the Reshut Rabim, and 3 sides of it are closed off. And there are 5 gates. We're assuming they're all sequential, not 2 facing each other. So 5 doorways for each chatzer from the front to the back of the mavoy. Okay? Says the Braita, chamesh chatzerot p'tuchot l'mavoy. You have 5 gates, 5 chatzerot opening up to one mavoy. Kulan mishtamshot im hachitzona. Everybody can use the space that's in front of the 5th doorway of the outside one, right? But an chitzona, the outside one, can only use the space according to, outside of their door, meaning they can only go into the mavoy up to their house. You don't get to go into the rest of the mavoy. A chitzona, the outside guy or people, mishtamshot la'atzma, they can only use their own space. V'hashar, now the rest of the people in the mavoy, mishtamshot im hashniya, let's say 5, 4, 3, 2, can use the space up to doorway number 2. Hashniya, the second guy from the outside, mishtamshot la'atzma, he can use the space in front of his gateway, mishtamshot im hachitzona, and in front of the outside person, number 1. But nimsa, it turns out, pnimit mishtamshot la'atzma, that the innermost person, number 5, as we're calling him, can use the chatzer, the mavoy, in front of his chatzer, and in front of every other person. So what you see from here is that you don't have to share the space according to all people. The innermost person is allowed to build a gate in front of his doorway because the outside people are not allowed to come in and use the space. So he can lock it off. He can close it off, him and his group. That goes against what Rafuna just said. Answers the Gemara Tanai. In fact, it's a machloket Tanaim. The Tanya, there's a Braita that says, let's say one person in the mavoy says, I no longer like my neighbors. They are not good people. I want to, what's actually not what he says. Sorry, I take it back. That's a different case. He says, my back door of my chatzer, not my house, my chatzer opens into another mavoy. So I want to open that up. I want to open up the door to the other mavoy. Of course, that's a little bit of a problem because now there's an entryway from one mavoy to the other through the chatzer. It's a shortcut, right? So if one person of bnei mavoy bikesh lachzer pitchol mavoy acher, bnei mavoy makvin alav, the people from that mavoy can say, I don't want you to do it. However, if there was a doorway there and they had sealed it off, and he says, I want to reopen this doorway that previously existed. They're not allowed to stop him. Divrei Rebbe. Now, don't worry, we're going to discuss that more tomorrow. That's Rebbe's opinion. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, if you have 5 courtyards that open up to one mavoy, kulan mishtamshot mavoy zu im zu. 5, all 5 can hang out in the mavoy with each other, which is what Rafuna said. Now, before we get to what Rafuna said, it says, what a chatzerot. We're talking about a mavoy, and Rebbe says something about opening a mavoy into another mavoy, and Rabbi Shimon Elazar says, what about the chatzer? So ask the Gemara, chatzerot, man dechar shamayu. Who mentioned the chatzer? Says, well, you're right. Clearly, there are words missing in this Braita. Chasurim mechasra, lachi katani. This is how the Braita should say. That Rebbe said, you can't open up your mavoy to a second, you can't open up your chatzer to a second mavoy. And now we add words. And if you have chamesh chatzerot ptuchot lemavoy, if you have 5 chatzerot that open up to one mavoy, says Rebbe, kulan mishtamshot im hachitzona. They all can use the space near the outside, near the street. And the chitzona can only use his own space. Exactly what Rafuna said. And number 2 can use 2 and 1, but not earlier. Number 3 can use 3, 2, and 1. So that Rebbe says like Rafuna, and that's where Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar comes and says, I'm reading it inside now, Divrei Rebbe, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, no. Chamesh chatzerot haptuchot lemavoy, kulam mishtamshot b'mavoy. That if you have 5 people opening into a mavoy, you can use not only from your space and out to the street, but you can use the entire mavoy everywhere inside the mavoy. They cannot open up and block you from any space within your own mavoy. I'm
So
gonna
wait a
stop
minute,
there.
all 5 people can use everything in the mavoy?
Correct, except that you can't remember. Yes, the answer is yes. However, remember the halacha we started with today is that you can't force them to split it up if it's a chatzer or a mavoy. Tos is really bothered why, if we're talking about a chatzer, how we all of a sudden came up to a mavoy. But let's just leave it aside. You can't force them to split it up unless there's 4 amot for each person in that space. But they can share it. And if they share it, they're allowed to use all the space. Tomorrow morning at 7:45 a.m. Eastern time, we are going to, God willing, continue from the 2 dots, 5 lines from the bottom.
Wouldn't this depend on the nature of the mavoy? It seems to me that when we talked about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, that would be a long, like a long road, so that the end of the last one could use this. But if you have a cul-de-sac and all 5 chatzerot open in the same mavoy in one place, it would seem logical that anyone can use any part of that mavoy. It would depend
Right,
on
I agree.
the structure of the mavoy.
Right, so the case is the first one you said, where it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So say 100 feet long and every 20 feet there's an opening.
Right.
So that's the debate. Can you go backwards, right? Can you go out? Can you just use your mavoy to go out to the street, or can you use the whole place to play balls sometimes? So that's the machloket. Rebbe and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar.
Use your mavoy to play, but still one would have to get from point 1 to point 5, right?
Yeah,
He has to, the person who lives in house number 5 still has to get to his house, right? So he has to
correct.
traverse the
Everybody
mavoy.
agrees. Everybody agrees that that person can use the whole mavoy. The question is, what about outside of that?
What do you mean outside?
Number 4.
Oh,
number 3,
can he
number
go
2.
past number 4, you mean?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's okay. Good night, everyone. Shavua tov. I'll see you tomorrow morning. A few hours. Miriam, glad to see you made it safe and sound.
Shavua tov. Thank you.
Chodesh tov.
Chodesh tov.
Thank you.